We state our name.
Diane Stefani.
Scott Nelson.
John Heggie.
Natalie Jektorowicz.
Jim Baumstark.
James Dolan.
Okay. Now, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Baumstark.
And I'll take a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to approve the regular and executive session minutes.
So moved.
I'm sorry,
Second.
yeah, of September 19th, yeah.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll move along to our communications sections. Dr. Deli?
Good evening. Thank you for joining us, everyone. This week is Principal Appreciation Week throughout the state of Illinois. The actual day is October 21st, as designated by the governor. So I would just like to take an opportunity to thank all of our principals, our assistant principals, for your hard work and dedication that you bring in the execution of your jobs each and every day, leading school buildings and the development of the whole child. Working collaboratively with a wide range of stakeholders is really the cornerstone of your important work. You come to school each day focused on teaching, learning, and the emotional welfare of everyone in your school building. Principals have also demonstrated their ability to be highly effective school leaders while balancing their own personal needs and the needs of their family, which is always very important, both as a professional and as someone who has a family. So on behalf of the entire District 34 community, I say thank you very much for your hard work, and I would ask others to consider extending a word of thanks as well when you have an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Deli. This comes to our audience comments section. Kathy, do we have any audience comments? All right. I will move along to consideration of resolutions on consent. I have the 22079 personnel report, the 22080 payroll warrants report, the 22081 vendor warrants report, the 22082 interfund transfer from working cash fund to O&M to capital projects. I have 22083 interfund loan transfer from working cash fund to bond and interest. I have 22084 authorization to accept donation, Gelfand. I have the 22085 internal subbing memo of understanding, renewal for 2223. And the 22086 AHS Global Incorporated nursing agreement. Does anyone have any questions before we move forward? Can I have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Second.
May we have a roll call vote, Katie?
Dolan.
Aye.
Heggie.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Jektorowicz.
Aye.
Stefani.
Aye.
Baumstark.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we'll move to consideration of other resolutions, discussion and action. This will be 22086 supplemental professional development to support English learners. Raquel?
We just wanted to share with you additional professional development that we are providing to all of our teachers who support English learners. One of 5 or 1 of 4 students in the classroom will often qualify or recently licensed. So providing this additional support to our teachers so they can better meet the needs of our English learners who recently exited will continue to support particular population that needs development and academic language for mathematics and
Does anyone have any questions?
Was I just reading right that the total cost is $12,000 for the contract?
Thank you for bringing it to us. Unless anybody else has any questions, I'll move along. Next, we go to our discussion section. We have the,
We
Or
just
just vote on it.
this?
oh, we do vote on it?
Sorry.
It's not on here, yeah. All right, is that a roll call vote, Katie?
Motion and a second.
Thanks. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call.
Peggy,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Jack Torowitz,
Aye.
Stefani,
Aye.
Tom Stark,
Aye.
Dolan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll move along to discussion. We'll start with the 22-23 CFAC charge. Eric?
So, this year, we'd like to engage CFAC in another process to update our 5-year financial forecast. And so we'd like to gather the group, work on key assumptions, and produce another forecast that could be presented to the board in January. And in addition, seeing as this trend of additional costs beyond our original estimates for construction, we thought also the group could tackle any possibilities or make a recommendation to the board, sort of based on the challenges that we're up against.
As creative as they can be, I hope, too.
Yes, exactly.
Does anybody have any questions about the CFAC charge that we're asking?
Or any thoughts on it?
Thank you to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it's very informative when they make their report. I kind of want to throw one more charge in there if they are willing to take the task. If they could maybe generate some sort of KPIs for us going forward, since our funding is more stable, we don't have the make whole payment anymore. I think it'll be easier to develop some sort of KPIs.
Yeah, we can do that,
So something to talk to.
definitely.
And also this, says the 5-year forecast. I think just given the inflationary environment, I'd like to at least make sure that sensitivity analysis to some key assumptions is at least part of the charge. Like, so what are the impacts if, for example, inflation stays at a sustained level of, say, 7 or 8% for several years? So that we understand, because we're in a more volatile economic environment, so I think understanding some key sensitivities as part of the charge should be explicitly identified if others agree.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
I believe in the past, a few CFACs have had a baseline and then two different assumptions, so I'm sure you'll come up with something.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Next, we'll move along to a resolution to approve the tentative 2022 tax levy and schedule in a public hearing for the 2022 tax levy.
Okay, so, typically.
Can you make sure you're talking to
Yes.
this, because it's a
Yeah.
video.
So typically, when it comes to a tentative tax levy presentation, we go through a lot. And I thought I'd spare us a little bit. There are additional slides and information that have been posted to board docs. But this year is a little bit unique for a couple reasons. And I thought that I'd focus on those a little bit more than just the mechanics. Tax levy is a request by the board for property tax dollars. It's important because it comprises approximately 82% of our total operating revenue. That's higher than it's been, and so it's even more important that that we focus on the tax levy. What you're looking at here is a history of CPIU. That's typically one of the biggest drivers for the increase in property tax dollars over the prior year extension. You'll see that 2021's, it's the calendar year, it's what we use for the 22 tax year, is 5%. And I don't show the full history since dating back to the beginning of when PTEL came into play, but this is the largest CPI we've seen since then. So even when costs are increasing closer to 7%, we're limited to an increase of just 5%. And if you look at the 3, 5, and 10-year average, it's not that high. To have a 10-year average of under 2% is low, especially given the expense increase that we've been seeing. Last year, in '21, new property played a bigger role than CPI. And so you see in the 2021 estimated year, you've got this almost $450 million. That's what we talked about last year at this table, same time. Unfortunately, given the challenges that the county faces with their software, they're also delayed in their 21 information, tax rates, final EAV, multiplier, you name it, we know almost nothing new since last year. Makes it tricky because you're making an estimate on an estimate. We're early enough now in October that I'm hopeful, in having spoken with the person who's in charge of this at Cook County, we're hopeful that by December we'll have more information about 21 so that our 22 ask is even that much more accurate, if you will, especially given the fact that we had a humongous TIF come off with the 21 year. To not have that information leaves us a little bit in the dark. But as always with this process, we'll make assumptions about what we don't know. And obviously, I've been working on this and fleshed it out every which way. So I'm not worried, but it's also great to have the prior year information before you make guesses about the future. The only other thing I'll mention here is that this is the year, 22, where this district will pick up approximately $1 million in EAV from the Waukegan Golf TIF that sunsetted with 21 year, with the 21 tax year. So it's all incorporated. It's part of what we're estimating is $15 million in new property, but I just thought I'd mention that.
Eric, I have a question on that last slide. Is it accurate that EAV in the 21 and 22 estimates are the same as 20? Or is that intentional, or is that?
So, you know, what we typically do and what you probably saw Liz do in her, actually, no, it should be a 2% increase. But your existing EAV, whether it goes up or down, has virtually no impact on your increased extension. So you're right, that 20, I mean, it's flat there. I would have assumed a 2% increase in 22.
But where does the 445?
But the 445 million will show up too also. So
Somewhere, right?
we're closer at 2.7, aren't we?
Sorry, you're right. I did not incorporate, yes, sorry.
I know it's an estimate because they haven't given it to us yet, but.
Yeah, it should have been there, yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
closer to that, okay.
Yes. Historic total tax rates, including bond and interest. If you recall, tax rates move inversely with EAV or property values. So while they fluctuate to some degree, based on that, you can see us recovering from 2010. For the most part, we stay within a normal range. So again, the only things we really know when it comes to the 21 and 22 tax year levy is CPI. We still don't know so much else. What I can tell you is for the 22 levy, we've got an assumption of new property at 15 million. Levy accommodates up to 55. There's the 2% that I would have liked to have applied in the last slide. The other thing I'll say is, in my preparation for the levy, we've contemplated EAV going down as well. We don't know, just playing around with that potential scenario. So while we can accommodate up to 55, levy also within certain funds, the statutory maximums, we also contemplate actually EAV going down. This board has typically held true to a resolution many years ago that tells the county do not add 3% for loss and cost in the cap funds, but we do it in bonds and interest, which is a 5% safety net they add on. Why is the levy always more than the estimate? Well, for the reasons I've kind of talked about, which is we don't know so much. You're forecasting, and you never want to miss an opportunity to capture some of these dollars, because if you do, you lose it in perpetuity, right? Your increase is always based on an increase over last year's extension. So with so much unknown, it's high, and with a high CPI, of course, you're going to go higher than that, trying to capture that full 5+%. Some historic levies, and then what the extension looks like. We've got the last number of years, and what you can see is for 22, the request stands at 7.68, but we only think a reasonable assumption is that we'd actually capture 5.6%. So we're asking for about 2% more than we actually think we'd receive. Again, another way of kind of showing some of the prior year's extensions. The fact that we're asking for 7.68, but think we'll get 5.58. Overall, Bond and interest is going to go up to some degree. But overall, we think we're looking at just over 5% increase across all funds. As required now by statute, we have to mention in our hearings what fund balance looks like, what we perceive it to be toward the end of this year. This is rather high. The thing I'll remind everyone again is we are up against some challenges with construction. So what we're showing here does not show the initial commitment of fund balance from the board, nor some of the overage. So it looks good, but be mindful of the fact that those contributions have not been made yet.
Could you give us a rough estimate if we just took the $20 million that the board promised? Where would we be in the yellow right now?
Within a couple years, as it's needed for cash flow?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep. So just some quick reminders. There's, again, these levy requests are above and beyond what we estimate the extensions to be based on the unknowns. Still bound by PTEL. The extension will be increased across the boundary, so individual tax bills may go up relative to your neighbors, increase or decrease in their property value. And the bond and interest levy is outside or above the cap funds levy. What we're asking the board to do is just sort of hear, review, and discuss the tentative levy, but we'll ask you to approve it in November, along with the supplemental tax levy that the board's been presented with the last number of years for some outstanding bonds and trying to capture the CPI increment for that. And then we'll hold a hearing in December to go over the final request, hopefully with some information from the county about 21.
No, we do this every year, but there are any questions?
So the 5.58 increase, is the right way to think of that as that's the 5% CPI plus an additional 0.58 to cover the new property? Is that
Yes.
a clean way to think about it?
Yes.
And you're saying CPI is 5%, but is that the real CPI or just because we're capped at 5%?
Because we're capped, so
So the real CPI is closer to 8%?
Well, it was 7 for
last year.
last year, but that's the
Right.
CPI that we're dictated for the 22.
I just want everyone to know that we're not going up full CPI.
Correct.
Exactly. And that's a great point to make because our state and our federal revenues pretty much remain flat except for one-time ESSER help. So you're relying on this other portion of revenue where you've got your increases in costs going up well beyond what you're actually able to capture. We really need that 5%.
Well, I don't want to mess up new property either, so I hope we get some data from the county.
Agreed.
Any
Is
other?
there any reason to be, I mean, how much of a cushion is in that recommendation for the new property piece? Like, is there any
to-
risk of leaving something on the table, I guess? I didn't.
No, so we can look at new property over 20 years, going up to 55 million should cover us.
Sure.
I think 28, aside from the TIF, I think 28 is the highest in the last.
So that's okay. So it was based on 55, even though you think expected it as 15, is that?
Exactly. That's
Okay.
that 2%.
There's our cushion. Anyone else? Okay. I guess we'll move along to number 3, the Student Success Roadmap. Matt? Yes, thank you. Some levity, I hope. No, just
Got the A-team here this evening.
yeah.
You have the A-team. If I have to, I guess.
And what kind of superheroes are the? Oh, I'm just curious.
It's DC tonight.
There we
for
go.
Those of you keeping
Thank you.
score, not to offend anybody, but. Okay. So thank you for your time. We're excited to be here with you and share what my colleagues and I think about quite often, and that is all of the procedures and policies and programs and opportunities to support our children. Some of those are very clear, explicit. You can see them every day and you can experience them. Other things are not as clear, but equally as important. And in terms of meeting the needs of our students, we're moving towards what we're calling this roadmap, and hopefully that makes sense at the end of our presentation. But really, what we're doing or adding to is something that hopefully moves in a very comfortable pace, where staff have a sense of commitment and of understanding in terms of meeting needs of our children, and whether that's in traditional ways like test scores or other accountability measures, or other ways that we're going to be looking at social emotional needs of our children. But we want to take it to the next step and make things more explicit, make things clear for our community, for our staff, and as a side note, we will be presenting this to all of our staff this week and next week, over the next couple of weeks. So really trying to bring this all together. So we're going to jump right into this here and get it started.
And so, as we know, we always tie everything to our strategic plan. And if you look at our vision statement, once again, you can see that it specifically speaks to inclusive and equitable school systems, which is important. Moreover, two of our goals listed above are guiding the work of our student success roadmap because they speak to student success and well-being and stewardship. Using data to differentiate to meet the needs of all learners is our top priority, as well as ensuring that our resources and schedules are allocated in such a way to allow for this. Are we on the right path? When we set goals, we need to monitor the progress towards meeting the goals. There are a number of metrics in which we can measure progress. So let's take a look at a few of the data sources that will help us determine if the work we are doing is resulting in positive outcomes for our students.
When we review our reading and math data after each assessment period, we notice that we do a pretty good job of meeting most of our student needs. However, in examining the data, we also identify that there are additional factors such as ethnicity, language services, and socioeconomic status that cause some gaps in student performance of specific student groups. So upon reflecting on those current performance levels, there are still some areas that can benefit from ways of looking at the data and instruction in a different way. So our student success roadmap will strategically address these discrepancies in the success to lead to the success of our particular student groups. One key way that we are working to improve outcomes is to take a closer look at the way we are teaming and providing instruction, to deepen it and refine those strategies. We won't go into great detail today, but it is important to take a glimpse of the work that we will do as a district to know what the priorities will be for the next few years and what our MTSS committees will be doing together at the building level and across the district. This work is ongoing and long-term, so let's take a look at the plan and what we will prioritize each year along the way.
Okay, so this is a visual of our roadmap. Each year represented on here shows a different instructional strategy or teaming practice that we want to elevate each year. So the current year, we're really focusing on school improvement planning. So this is a continuation of some of the work that we did last year, where having buildings, instead of just looking at their building-wide data and grade level data, they're also digging a little bit deeper, and they're starting to disaggregate their data by various student groups. So some of the groups that Raquel mentioned, looking at by ethnicity, by program, by socioeconomic status, and then really if they're identifying any disparities within their data, that's where they will formulate a school improvement goal. And so around that, they'll kind of think about strategies, instructional practices that they will really work on as a building to help kind of close those gaps. And so that's work that they'll continue and it'll be ongoing. The next year, the 23-24 school year, is where we're going to look at data-informed collaboration. So with that, we're kind of looking at students that we identify as needing additional support, whether it's through reading specialist, math specialist, EL teacher, special ed teacher, whoever it is, and then kind of bridging the gap between what that support looks like outside of the general education classroom with what happens within the gen ed classroom, so that we can really look at across the student's day, how are we providing support and generalizing those skills. And so really leveraging the expertise of all those people on a more regular basis. We're calling these our instructional planning meetings, where teachers will get support from all these different experts on providing small group differentiated instruction to meet the needs of all students. And so then in the 24-25 school year, we're really going to focus on teacher collaboration time. So currently, to varying degrees, teachers have that time to come together and do some collaboration. However, we want to provide a little bit more structure and consistency around what those conversations look like. And so that'll be the focus of that school year, to really think about proactively planning lessons and units that really take into the account the individualized needs of each and every student. And then the last year represented on our roadmap, 25-26, it's really going to be about kind of continuing to refine a lot of those practices that I just talked about, but also elevating SEL. So really helping teachers kind of build a toolbox of different strategies that they can use to support students with their social emotional learning within the classroom. And while this is the last year represented on this roadmap, this is really going to be an ongoing, kind of never-ending journey, because we want to always continue to work on how we can improve outcomes for students and improve progress and help all students achieve success. So along the way, the year prior to each priority focus area, principals will be meeting to collaborate and plan the structure for the following year. And so they'll be gaining input from staff, communicating with staff all along the way, so that everyone's really going to be in the loop and knowing what the expectations are going into each kind of focus area and into each year.
Allison, can you remind the board who you are and what you do?
I am the MTSS coordinator for the district.
Thank you.
Okay, so even though SEL was
And
sort
who
of...
are you, Natalie? And what do you do?
I am the Director of Student Services.
Thank you.
Can't hear me.
Louder.
Sorry. They saved the best for last. I'm just kidding. I'm the Director of Student Services. Oh, that's very loud now. Great.
Could you say your whole name too, Natalie?
Natalie Zealous.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so even though Allison, when she shared the timeline, the 25-26 school year had a focus on SEL, we're going to continue, of course, to weave SEL practices into everything we do. This year, in fact, our MTSS district leadership team is going to be rolling out our Tier 2 SEL intervention program called Connections. Connections is sort of a mentoring program, if you will. So students are strategically assigned with an adult in their building. That adult may do some coaching, they may do some goal setting with them, meet with them daily to just differentiate and really hone in on some individual SEL supports that student might need. I did have the opportunity last year. I was at Hanking, and that was one of the pilot schools for the program. So I, of course, signed up to be a mentor, and the power and the potential of the program is going to be really impactful for our students, I think. And so we're excited for this year to be rolling it out at all 8 of our buildings. It's very exciting. And then we'll continue to focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions for SEL, enhancing those, and then, as Allison mentioned, in the 25-26 school year, really elevating our Tier 1 SEL focus, and then additionally continuing to build relationships with students, something that our staff is really excels at for sure, and something that we all know is sort of the foundation for having conversations around social emotional learning. So we will keep that in motion, building relationships with students. And so this was just a broad overview of our plan. We will continue to give more specific details as time goes on. And, you know, I think you might be thinking, aren't we already doing some of these things in our buildings? And of course, that's absolutely accurate. We are doing these, you know, this plan is in motion, but we, you know, the goal is to really just enhance what we're already doing and to make it more meaningful and deeper and more intentional and systematic for our students. So just honing in on that. And so we'll leave you with this quote, which is, there's always new work to do, which involves making our existing work stronger, of course, more student-centered, more rigorous, more joyful, and often that is the most important work to be done.
So as a way to continue the communication output and to really bring some sense of transparency and ultimately accountability, Kathy Kajijian and her team first helped to create these graphics because this started actually on my gigantic board in my office with some very crude and sad looking drawings that Allison and Kathy can attest to. and then she made magic, beautiful magic out of it. So live right now, out on the web, we have basically what we shared with you tonight and in these markers. And again, when we hope that parents and our community and our stakeholders hear, as they should be hearing constantly, school improvement planning. Well, what does that mean other than seeing the plan? So we wanted to bring some definition, some concepts, some action that the schools will be doing in the spirit of this improvement plan. And these other markers act in the same way. And so it's kind of part just visualizing, again, all of these different teams and ways that we're maximizing the potential of our children, and the instructional practices, again, much that happens in the background, behind the scenes, and bringing them forward with some definitions and with some very clear planning that matches with our strategic plan, really series of goals, and we highlighted 2 of those tonight, but bringing it all together for you and the community this evening. And with that, we're at the end here.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the team?
Maybe a comment and a question.
Sure.
If I may. So I think this is really helpful, and I would encourage everybody to kind of read very explicitly the words that were chosen around the plan, the vision, the goals, because I think they should resonate with where we are as a community. Using data to provide differentiated instruction to meet the academic needs of each learner, improve overall growth and achievement, and narrow achievement gaps is certainly a long-term commitment that the district is making that we should recognize as a community, but also kind of appreciate the challenge of doing that with data, not just superficial data or not just objective data, but individual data around the performance of the students is really going to be critical to the success of the individual as well as the community. And so, my question is really, can you keep us updated as this develops, as this goes? How are we measuring the success of, shifting that trend line for the individual, shifting the impact in communities, changing the perceptions of how this approach is actually, meaningfully augmenting the trajectory of our students, because it is certainly an ambitious goal.
That's a perfect sort of question and explanation, I think. Next month, and this is a little bit of a precursor, at the end of the month, the Illinois State Board of Education is releasing the Illinois report card for the whole state, including our report card. So that will really ground on the highest level, the Illinois Assessment for Readiness and those types of measures. And we'll then be sharing a secondary data feature with much of what we use, that being NWA, Ames Web, Panorama for our social emotional learning, some district insight. So ultimately, the touch point that I think is most important, Dr. Dolan, that you mentioned, is the individual child's trajectory and changing that for many kids. We just talked this morning in Cabinet about the importance of goal setting and the ways to measure that with children. The middle schools are engaging pretty heavily right now in individual goal setting, and typically the route there, we're choosing it right now, it's not always the best, but is indeed through NWA testing, because every child gets a projected goal or an expected winter point goal and then end of the year goal. So we will definitely be sharing. I know you appreciate this data. For some people, it's a painful, boring experience as much as we try to jazz it up and make it amazing. But yeah, whether there are reports, and Dr. Deli and our team can kind of figure out what type of ongoing checkpoints make sense for the board.
Thank you.
Natalie?
Well, I'm just gonna say we like data, Matt, so. We like data because it's something we can hang on to, right? I think everybody likes, because it sets up mileposts and things like that, so don't worry about boring us with data. I'm just gonna, this is probably obvious, but I just wanna make this point, that this is on top of the work you're already doing. So like, for instance, the SEL Tier 1 practices, you're constantly addressing Tier 1 SEL. This is on top of the ongoing work you're always doing every day in buildings. I just wanna make that point clear, that by concentrating on one area, you're not forgetting about the others. I think that's important to know.
Yes.
I really like that we're linking directly to our strategic plan. I feel like the strategic plan is the road that you're taking us through right now. And so it was great to see it in practice. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add?
Yeah.
James? Jim?
Just to, like, maybe at a high level. So, like, in some ways, I feel like we're looking at a finished piece of art. You know, artists make choices along the way when they're crafting their plan. So can you just give us a little insight into, like, why this plan? Like, how did you choose those markers, or why 3 years, or how did you decide what the different steps were? Just a little, was it the four of you? Did you get help outside? Or just, give us a little insight into the artist creation of this.
Wow, artists. Yeah, very impressive.
You're speaking Matt's language now.
Yeah.
Well, so much of this, I would say, is organic to our multi-tiered system of support, which maybe came from RTI, response to intervention, has evolved. And much of that is through our energy behind developing our tiered system. So Tier 1, our general education experience for all of our children, and then our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. As those have been evolving over the years, we can only be honest and say children are complex little human beings, and teaching and learning is a complex process. And we took a step back from those complexities and drilling down into such simple concepts as, if we think about our literacy instruction, and starting with phonemic awareness and moving into phonics and then moving into early literacy instruction, kind of how all of that ebbs and flows between something like a multi-tiered system of support, which it's kind of vague and not crystal clear. I will say that Allison has been integral in developing systems, which then brings in the data element. So, we've always had instruction, we've always had curriculum, we've always had children with needs. Layering the system now of support and defining that, and that's using matrices to determine where we want our children, our expected performances to be, and what happens when they're either overperforming, and what are we going to do about it, or if they're underperforming. Some of the origin is from concepts like professional learning communities, where there's essential questions that you're always asking about children and their needs and how they're responding to the curriculum and the teaching and learning. So I think in the background, and the principals have been phenomenal, Allison, the whole teaching and learning team, in developing school improvement plans that are now flexing in different ways. This roadmap concept, to kind of bring it all together, I think you can take different options, whether it's a continuous improvement model, kind of the cyclical concept. We felt that we were trying to move from a point A to a point B, where we believe in our hearts and our minds, and it's always our quest and our spirit to ensure that we're meeting the needs of every children. While we think that's the end of our road, and this road is aiming super high, but we have to, right? We want 100% of our children achieving their maximum potential. And again, whether that's something like on the Illinois Assessment for Readiness, or it's on a COGAT assessment, or it's on a WASI, or it's on a MAP score, or they're thinking about their self-care and their panorama data changes. It's amazing once we start to think. So we kind of built and thought of these three segments. Honestly, this is our first time really talking with a group outside of our own little cohort. I don't know if we're still making any sense. I hope we are, and coming across. And so while, art can be interpreted, and this is open for interpretation, teachers are going to interpret what we're saying and what we're doing, and they're a part of this just organically as teachers and working with our children. The community is going to see the interpretation of this way to kind of bring it back to that art piece. So this may evolve as well, naturally. So that was a long explanation. I'm sorry. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Well, I think, and Jim, you had asked about sort of what went into the time sequencing of some of this too. I thought I heard you say,
like,
but
Yeah, just like why those roadmap points and like why 3 years? And I'm not questioning it. I'm just trying to get a sense
Yeah,
for like
because part
why
of
not
it,
5 years? Why not one? Why
Yeah,
not faster?
part
Why
of
not-
it's intuition, part of it, I think, is what we know about best practice in terms of laying some of these things out, the amount of time it takes to train and retrain people and have it impact practice and then be able to show it in demonstrable ways is just something that generally takes a 3-year time frame. But again, it's playing off the art theme. You know, mosaics sort of come together in different ways at different times, and so it's not. This shouldn't really be viewed as a static design either.
I was just going to add to that. I think, I don't think I mentioned when I was speaking either, that after each year, we will evaluate the progress of kind of like what the previous year, how we did, and we'll make tweaks, or we'll slow down, or we'll speed up. So it really is like, this is what we're projecting out for now, but it's something that definitely is going to be very fluid and will be very responsive to kind of like how it goes our first year, then kind of the next year, and so on. And we'll be adding on additional kind of like focus areas for years to come.
So I'm assuming as a living plan, you'll keep us up to date.
Yes, and it will never live independently, really, of the strategic. I mean, that's the linkage here. So I don't want to lose that either. We're not going back to the days where there's a plan for everything. All of these are interwoven, and so when we get to the point where we recreate and revision our new strategic plan, which will come around before we know it, you know, this will be one of the cornerstones of that plan.
And just one follow-up. This is kind of related to the data comments on the pathway metrics. I mean, these are a lot of great metrics, and when I see these listed here, it kind of screams dashboard to me. So it's just maybe a kind of a charge to think about, is there a way to package this in a way that's, you know, not piles and piles of data, maybe piles and piles of data that underscores it all, but like a nice dashboard, especially at the board level, right? That's what we're looking for, is
Some
where are all the
KPIs,
dials on
You
these
see, they're
different
all
things.
smiling when you sit
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think this is exactly what we'd want to see as a board, is like how are the needles moving on every one of these bullets? And I don't think we're talking every meeting, but you know, maybe 6-month checkpoints or whatever the right time
3 times a
schedule is
week,
based on what you think works. What was that?
3 times a week, right?
3 times a week. Okay.
Yeah, you think explaining EAV is difficult.
So this is your teaching and learning team, and it's not often that it's really assembled this way. Someone decided not to give Brian a part for some reason.
They gave me a part.
Yeah, he's.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
be speaking next month. But
Oh,
Right, yeah, there's
I
a,
wanted
yeah,
to give other people an opportunity to share their wisdom.
but this is a very strong group, and we should all be thankful to have them, so thank you.
thanks. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along. We have audience comments. Kathy, do we have any audience comments tonight? Okay. Then I'll move on to our report section. I have the True North Board Meeting Report, the Phase 2 and 3 Construction Change Order Report, the number 3 Referendum Expense Report, number 4 Monthly Budget Report, the number 5 Current Financial Projections, the number 6 D34 Collection Development Practices, Review 22-23, and number 7, the following meeting agenda. Are there any questions with the reports?
Yeah, I had a quick question on the budget report. I was just looking at the O&M for 22. It's just like a quick blurb on why that went from, 9 something to budgeted for 14.75. And I'm sure it's tied into the referendum work, but.
So I'm sorry, on the O&M fund, the revenues?
Yeah, and revenues.
Why? So why did it go up to 14.4?
Yeah, that's, 50% bump there.
The TIF.
Okay. That's
There it
good
is.
enough. Thank you.
That's where we put it.
So that's when a TIF expired, that's where you decided to increase part of a fund.
Exactly.
Good answer.
Yes.
Good question.
Yes.
Any other questions for the
I
report?
just had a question on number 6, the D34 Collection Development Practices. That just looked like an unfamiliar report, like not something that's regularly there. Just
No, it's
why is that there now?
It's once a
Like,
year, right?
well, no, it's actually practice. It's a practice we've been following and hadn't formalized and had the board review it in a long time. So
Okay.
we wanted to make sure that as we're continuing to move forward, that we brought it to the group for guys to see and have any comments if you had any.
Was there any big change in what was done, or is this more just documenting kind of what's been always been
Documenting
done?
stuff in this board having not seen over the years, but it'll be something that doesn't have much change, but when it does, we certainly will be bringing it forward more. There is no change to it from what we've been doing in my 18 years.
Well, and I don't know that the board's seen it, at least in the time I've been here.
Yeah, I was gonna
It's
say,
just
so
one
it
of those
looks
things
unfamiliar, so-
sometimes you take for granted. It's an internal working document that we use all the time, but just good practice to share out periodically.
But you also review it annually.
Oh, yes.
That's what I want
Yes,
to point out. It's
absolutely.
reviewed annually.
Yeah.
Even, and it's available to us, but you're bringing it to us now. Feel
Just
free to bring
one-
it every year then.
Just one question, because I didn't see it in there, and begs the question. Is there cross-building sharing of materials?
There is.
Okay, it's just not in here, but like if we have like 19 copies of one book at one school.
No, because of the procedures and the practices that we all work through a process in terms of getting materials, the system that we use as a district allows for crossover between buildings, and it's often that a whole 100 books may come from one building over to another at the same grade band. Like, we're not sending stuff
Yeah.
from Lyons necessarily to Pleasant Ridge, but we are sending stuff from Westbrook to Lyon or to Hankey to Lyon.
Thanks,
Not that
because
Lyon's the only one getting stuff, but yes.
it just said each school, so I just wanted to make sure there was some, okay, all right.
Any other questions? Okay. Next, we move to other business, and I know we usually don't have any, but I did want to point out, it was an email that went out, that we are in the Character Counts food drive, and tomorrow is a Stuff the Bus on Tuesday. Can I ask maybe if Kathy could speak to that really quick?
Absolutely. This food drive happens every year, I think for the last 18 or more years, in conjunction with other districts in the Glenview community, District 30, OLPH. And it typically had been building-based. Each building would solicit donations for the food pantry and have collection bins, but this year we had the idea of getting buses, and we'll be driving a couple of buses around the community, and we've put out the stops where people can meet us and drop off their donations, so it's more community-based rather than just at the schools. And we'll take everything right over to the food pantry at the end of the route tomorrow. So,
I love it.
starting at 4:30 at ATIA and Westbrook Admin Building. So if you have anything to drop off, we'll throw them on the bus.
Sounds
Not
fun.
under the bus.
Yeah. That sounds great. All right, and next we'd move to adjournment.
Actually,
Oh,
I
John?
had one more other business.
Sure.
We won't meet again until after Veterans Day. So I know we want to wish all of our veterans a happy Veterans Day, and thank you for your service.
Thank
Hear,
you,
hear.
John. Yeah, cheers. Now I'll ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Can I, do we need a roll call, Katie, or?
Nope, that's it. Voice
All right, the motion carries. We're adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.